Want to visit the lands of the Bible from the comfort of your home? Well, you've come to the right place. Welcome to the Breakforth Journeys podcast, where we take you right to the very places where the stories of the Bible took place. Be encouraged, be inspired, fall in love with the Bible all over again. Now, here is your host, Arlen Salty.
Hello, Breakforth Journeys friends. Thanks so much for tuning in to this episode number 14 of the Breakforth Journeys podcast. Hans, Elsa, and I are so blessed that you're with us here today. We're so grateful to you and the thousands of others around the world who are listening into this podcast. Today's episode takes us to Tabgha on the shores of the Sea of Galilee. Tabgha is very close to Capernaum. This is the traditional place where Jesus appeared again to Peter after his resurrection and not only placed a call on him, but also reminded him of how much he loved him and forgave him. Today, as Hans speaks, we're on the shores of the lake. In fact, you can hear the gentle lapping of the waves in the background as Hans shares with our group and, of course, with you today. At the end of Hans's message today, there will be a quiet moment to reflect on God's deep love for you and our love for Him in return. But now, let's journey to the shores of the Sea of Galilee, such a beautiful and inspiring place, to listen in as Hans shares another wonderful word about God's immense love.
So my friends, right now you are truly on holy ground. You see the church over there, and that church is built upon a rock. And it's very much like the rocks that we see here, right? An ancient tradition, very strong, points out that rock over there to be the place where John 21 took place. So this is an appropriate time to reflect on John 21. So we will try to walk through that text briefly. And I read from verse 1. After this, Jesus revealed himself again to disciples by the Sea of Tiberias. And he revealed himself in this way. Simon Peter, Thomas, called the twin, Nathanael of Cana in Galilee, the sons of Zebedee, and two others of his disciples were together. Simon Peter said to them, I am going fishing. They said to him, we will go with you. They went out and got into the boat, but that night they caught nothing. Just as day was breaking, Jesus stood on the shore. Yet the disciples did not know that it was Jesus. Jesus said to them, children, do you have any fish? They answered him, no. He said to them, cast the net on the right side of the boat and you will find some. So they cast it, and now they were not able to haul it in because of the quantity of the fish. That disciple whom Jesus loved therefore said to Peter, it is the Lord. When Simon Peter heard that it was the Lord, he put on his outer garment, for he was stripped for work, and threw himself into the sea. The other disciples came in the boat, dragging the net full of fish, for they were not far from the land, but about 100 yards off. When they got out on land, they saw a charcoal of fire in place, with fish laid out on it, and bread. Jesus said to them, bring some of the fish that you have just caught. And just a couple of details here from the text. It says, Jesus revealed himself again. That's a word for us all. He wants to reveal himself again and again and again. And the reason the apostles were here was obedience. Isn't that a fun word? Very popular today, right? Obedience. They came here because Jesus had commanded them to go here, right? And for us, this is like a mountaintop experience, right? For the apostles, this was their everyday life. This was the place where they grew up, where they worked. So, for them, this was like Jesus saying to you, go to your kitchen, go to your living room, go to your working place, there I will reveal myself to you. So he wanted to show them that he was the resurrected one, leading them also in their everyday life. And they go fishing. And I think that is wonderful that they go fishing, because they did what they usually did in their everyday life, but one big difference. They did it in obedience to Jesus, waiting for him to reveal himself. So I say hallelujah for us doing the ordinary things that we do in our everyday life, if we do it because we wait on Jesus in obedience. And then Jesus, maybe it's right there. Isn't that awesome? That Jesus himself stood. And isn't it very strange that the text says the disciples did not recognize him? I mean, they had seen him as the resurrected one already, right? So how come? Well, we will have to ask Jesus in heaven, right? But let me just give you one thought. It might be that they did not recognize Jesus, even though he was standing there. If they just would have looked, they would immediately have recognized him. So they were looking without seeing. You know why? Well, I think it was because they did not expect Jesus to reveal himself here. Maybe they thought he should be up on the mountain. Maybe they thought it should be in Capernaum. Maybe they thought it should be on the Mount of Transfiguration. What do I know? But they were just not expecting him right there, right then. And this is, at least for me, a reminder. It's so easy that when we wake up a new day, we have already, so to speak, pre-planned how Jesus is going to show up. Well, I think he loves to show himself for us in new places, in new ways, to underline that he's the one who is in control. Amen? Amen. And then Peter, he needs John to help him to understand that it is Jesus, right? And I think that is awesome. You know, Peter was the great leader for the first church, and he needed someone else, a Christian brother, to help him to understand it's Jesus. And this is an encouragement, I think, for us, not the least throughout this trip, to help each other, right? Maybe you pray for someone else here, you get the Bible word. Maybe you see someone who's a little bit sad and you just go up and comfort them. 1,000 different ways. I think we have a calling to kind of help each other to see there is Jesus in your life. And then Peter does something very strange. He puts on his cloak and then he gets into the water. You know, some things are the same throughout 2,000 years. You know, I wouldn't put on a jacket before I went swimming. So you see, the cloak, this is of deep significance, because the cloak in Jesus' days was much more than a jacket. The cloak was a symbol for the protection. You remember Bartimaeus? Well, you know, he heard that Jesus was around, right? And he longed for Jesus to heal him, and he wanted to get to know Jesus. So what did he do? It says in the Gospels, he threw off his cloak. He threw off his cloak. He was like, Jesus, I want to get to know you in an intimate way. I have nothing to hide. I trust you completely. Peter, he wanted to see Jesus. He longed for Jesus, to meet him again, right? Because he loved him. But he did like that. And that might be very much like you and me. We long for Jesus. We want him to have access to more and more rooms in our life. But at the same time, many times we can do like this. And why did Peter do it? Well, probably I think this, you know, he denied Jesus 3 times, and Jesus had already told him he was forgiven, right? Showed him the wounds. But still, you know, Peter was still struggling with believing that Jesus really loved him that much, that he really had forgiven him. And also, he was struggling to believe that Jesus actually was going to use him. And then it says in the text that when they got to shore, there was a fire there. You saw that? Charcoal? That word is, in the Greek, that word, we only have one more time in the whole Bible. You know where? The fire, when Peter denies Jesus. Do you think it's a coincidence? No. So it's obvious Jesus, maybe he even have arranged the fire. So it's exactly similar to the fire that was burning when Peter denied Jesus. So Jesus wanted to communicate to Peter that this was a time when the fire was going to be lit again in his heart. And then comes the conversation. And when they had finished breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?" He said to him, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." He said to him, "Feed my lambs." He said to him a second time, and they were walking. We know that from the Gospel of John. They walked, okay? So maybe they walked this way, on the rocks. Peter and Jesus and John, eavesdropping. He said to him a second time, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" He said to him, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." He said to him, "Tend my sheep." He said to him the third time, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" Peter was grieved because he said to him the third time, "Do you love me?" And he said to him, "Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you." Jesus said to him, and then he just repeats the calling for him to be a leader in the church. The thing now, to understand this text, you have to understand the Greek words for love. There were 3 Greek words for love, at least that we want to address right now. First we have agape, and that was the highest level. And then we have division 2, and that was phileo. And that was love, but if agape, that was the first kind of love, the best kind of love. That was the love, that was like a waterfall. It just keeps on pouring. It keeps on, even though it meets, coldness and bitterness and hatred, it just keeps on loving. That is Jesus on the cross, right? Agape. Then you have the second division, and that is phileo. That is love that is dependent on a response. That is love that cannot stand on its own legs. Do you understand what I mean? You need someone to affirm you. And then we have the third love, and that is eros. That is the third division. That's the kind of love that you can have to a granola bar. If you say, "I love granola bars," you're not concerned about the best for the granola bar, right? You just want it to serve your needs. Well, you see, Jesus now, when Jesus walks with Peter alongside here, he says to him, looks him into the eye. He has died for him on the cross. He's God and a human being at the same time. And he says to Peter, "Agape, do you love me the highest level?" And, before the denial, I think Peter would have said, "I loved you, more than anyone else." But now he knows about himself, how much he needs Jesus for giving love every day. So he says to Jesus, he goes down one level and he says, "Phileo, division 2, I love you, but I do not love you as you love me." And they repeat that the second time. Jesus says, "Agape, division 1, and Peter answers, "Division 2. And then the third time, Jesus says to Peter, "Division 2. It's like he says to him, "This is what I've known all the time, that you do not agape me as I do you. You love me, but you are dependent on my love and not the opposite way around." And at this point of time, I think Peter is crying and he's saying to Jesus, "You know everything. You know that I love you." Because he does love Jesus, but his love is not as strong as Jesus' love. And at this beach, I think it's an appropriate moment for us, in the midst of our shortcomings, in the midst of us needing God's forgiveness every day, I think this is the appropriate place for us to say to Jesus, "I love you. I love you."
Every time we bring a group to Tabgha, here on the shores of the Sea of Galilee, we take some time for quiet meditation to consider God's great love for us and then our loving response in return. So why don't you just take a moment right now, just a quiet time, and do the same as the music plays softly and as you hear the waves splashing on the shoreline. I'll be back in just a minute. If you sensed God speaking to you and you'd like to share this with someone, always feel free to send us an email to info@breakforthjourneys.com. We love to pray for people all over the world. And if you'd like to see some photos of the Sea of Galilee, as well as some pictures of members of our group quietly meditating along the shore, why don't you head over and take a look at breakforthjourneys.com. That's breakforthjourneys.com. And as always, if you'd ever like to join us on one of our Breakforth Journeys trips to the lands of the Bible, don't forget to email us at info@breakforthjourneys.com. That's info@breakforthjourneys.com. And we'll be sure to let you know about our next spiritual journey of a lifetime. Hans, Elsa, and I look forward to meeting you again in our next episode of the Breakforth Journeys podcast as we take you on a virtual tour to the lands of the Bible where the scriptures truly come to life.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Breakforth Journeys podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, please leave us a review on iTunes. And remember to subscribe so you don't miss our next inspiring episode as we take you to another place in the lands of the Bible. For more information on this show, including links, beautiful photos of the Holy Land, and to learn more about our upcoming trips, head over to breakforthjourneys.com.